I didn't realize just how rebellious I was until much later. I was not just violent and being in gangs and things like that, but I also got involved in drugs. And quite bad drugs, actually. And it was only the last few weeks of my university that I came face to face with God. And I had a major Damascus experience. So it was a very difficult thing for me to have to face up to who I truly was. Wherever I was with Christians around me, and I'm saying things that people know already. People like John Nganga here knew me when I was not who I was. And many others who are here. Whenever I would go to the toilet and no Christians were around, I said, I'm going to see Jesus. Just to see the pain in their face, because I liked it when they were hurt. And I was into all kinds of things. And I joined the student movement at the university, and once when we had to make sure that the students went on strike, I was called by the student body resigned because the heat was too much. So we had to form a government, so to speak, in absentia. And I was called as the field marshal to ensure that this university went on strike, even those who didn't want to go on strike. It so happened that they all went on strike, but 3 days later I was arrested, and I went through the most difficult time and the most painful time of my life at the time. And it's at that time that I remember the words of a young architecture student who was just living next door to me. His name was Paul Kikule. And Paul Kikule, knowing me, but his room was opposite mine in Hall 8. And he used to say to me, it doesn't matter how far you've gone, Christ can still have you back. And I called Paul Kikule a bloody Christian because I bloodied him a lot. He would say that and I would beat him. But you know one thing about him, it's just he continued, he was relentless in that, he kept telling me about that, regardless of what I did to him. Now I remembered Paul Kikule when I was in jail, with him saying, it doesn't matter how far you've gone, Christ can still have your back. And in a moment of desperation, really, when I looked at myself, and I could see that I couldn't change myself, my life was a complete mess. I was in debauchery. I did all sorts of things. I was in drugs. And I said to myself, as audibly as I say to you today, if you're Christ, are the kind of person you make yourself out to be, then I want you to come into my life and change me, because I can't change myself. And I said that, and I didn't know what would happen. I thought perhaps Christ would suddenly show up and said, here I am, come up. Nothing like that happened. I was still in a cell. What did happen is somebody came into the cell and called me out, and they released me. It was about 2 or 3 in the morning. And when they released me, and it was in the cell up in the industrial area, I thought to myself, well, I know what these people want to do. When I get out and walk around in the industrial area at that time of the morning, they'll probably just shoot me and I'll disappear. I came out of the prison and ran across, because my brother used to live in Nairobi West, and ran across through the bush. At that time it was bush and it's all built up. And I went. Now, I didn't quite realize the gravity of what I had done in that cell. until later when the university was reopened and we went back to the university. And it's as if I had walked into a completely different country, completely different environment. And I remember we went up there to, we were talking at that time to the then Vice Chancellor, who was, there was a debate going on there. And I remember saying to people that I was a Christian, and people nearly beat me because of saying that, because they couldn't believe that I was a Christian. And even some of the Christians who knew me didn't believe I had made any confession. But I thank God for that, because it gave me a completely different perspective about life. And it showed me that there is something much bigger than most of us realize that there is. And I started walking that walk. So many good Christians took me under their wing. John Geshinga, John here, little John here. He was younger than me, that's why I'm saying you're little John here. And they took me. I'm so grateful that they didn't let me go. Some didn't believe that I'd become a Christian. In fact, they thought when I started walking around with Christian girls, they thought that maybe that's what I wanted to do, just to find a Christian girl. But thank God that they did that for me. But slowly and surely, as I began to walk this walk, as I started reading God's word, as those words which I had read before, heard before, began to have life, I started realizing what a great challenge it is. Not just to live a Christian life, but to be a Christian in a community which says it is Christian, but lives a life which is completely secular. And I've come to know that much more as I've grown into my, and I don't really want to go into much of the other stuff, but I've gone into my life as I've started getting into my professional life, and I've realized what a great challenge it is to be a Christian and to live a Christian life. And one of the greatest challenges is that of integrity. And integrity just means being whole. Being that which you say you are, wholly, completely. Not different colors in it, not different ways in it, but a form of integrity that puts you together to have a moral rectitude that keeps you one, so that you're not one thing and say you are another. And I've come to realize that that is a major, major challenge. That has been a challenge in my life. And I've realized just how difficult it is sometimes to try and trust God for that. In my short life, I'm now 74, going on to 75. And in that short life, I've realized just how it is, how easy it is to slide away from what you believe and to give yourself exceptions and to give even reasons why you shouldn't be one or the other. I've had the benefit of being appointed in some of these places that government appoints you. And I was appointed in an organization that deals with wildlife. And I can tell you for sure, it's KWS. I was on the board of KWS. And issues that came to that board worried me. One of the things that we we once were asked to do, an issue came to the board, and we were asked to excise part of a national park to provide for certain developments, as they call it, by a private developer. Now, on the law, it was quite clearly not right. Secondly, it was quite clearly not permissible under the law. But we were being told, but you know, there are exceptions, that we must do this, that, the other. The law was very clear as to what we could do, that we cannot do this without Parliament. And I recall saying at the board that we cannot do this because the law doesn't allow us as board members to do it. And people say, oh, but are there no exceptions? He says, no, the law seems to be very clear that we can't do it without Parliament. And secondly, certainly we cannot do it so as to provide a way for private development. There was discussions of back and forth, until later I was called aside and I was told, do you know who's asking us to do this? Do you have any idea? I said, no. I was told who was asking us to do it. And I realized that it's probably coming from an office from which you cannot say no. So I said, well, what do you want us to do? He said, we have to find a way. You're the lawyer on the board. Find a way of doing it. I said, all right, let's go back to the board and we'll see what to do. We went back to the board and I said, Chair, I'm not the chair. I said, Chair, I think it's good to get everybody's viewpoint on this. And everybody gave their viewpoint on this. And they said it's good for the viewpoint to be recorded. They recorded it, came to me, and I made my viewpoint. And I said, I am not able to accept it. And if it is necessary for me to leave the board, I'd be quite happy to do that. He said, no, we can't do that. We cannot look as if the board is not working together. I said, it doesn't matter what we should look like. What matters is what we should do. And as far as I'm concerned, we cannot do this. I cannot accept it. And of course, that caused a lot of disruption. That all came through it went all the way up to where it's supposed to go. And and it was very soon after that we were supposed to visit the same office. And before we went to the same office, we went with the minister in charge of that particular docket. And he said to us, this matter is going to come up in that office. What are we going to be saying? I said, well, we'll say exactly what we were saying. We will say what the board, the majority of the board have said, and I will say what I want to say. He said, no, but you can't do that. I said, I can. I will. Because that is what my heart tells me, my reading tells me. And it happened. And I remember the particular high officer, the president actually, saying to me, I hear you're saying this. And I said, yes, I'm saying this. And I think everybody thought I would be hanged or something like that. It didn't happen. But I was so grateful that you can stand. And why was that? Because the one I was serving said to me that he will take care of me. And I took learning. That was one issue. And I'm going just to tell you about the integrity issue. The other came the situation on the same board when suddenly we got a new chief executive was sitting there, and the chief executive came in, was introduced to us, and we wondered what this is. So I said, I looked through the act. I said, this is what the law says about how the chief executive comes to the board. I was told, look, that's not for you to say. The top has decided this is going to be the chief executive. I said, yes, I know that's what has happened, but this is what the law says. So we have to, as a board, have to say something about this. I was told, no. You've forgotten why you're here. You're here to serve the people of the country. And I said, this is precisely what I'm doing. I'm serving the people of the country. Well, that issue again came up when we visited the same office. And I was told directly to my face, I hear you're saying I cannot do this. And I said, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the law does not allow you to do this. and it was, everybody froze because we're all sitting there with a very high office and a very powerful individual, and you're saying this to him. And then, I said, that's all I'm saying. He said, but Attorney General could tell me this. I said, yes, he should tell you that. So we walked out, have a picture with them. And I thought this was the end of me. Until the same high individual called me aside and said, we must have tea. And I said, yes, we'll have tea. Of course, the fact is that the CEO remained. When we went next to the board, I said, let's record the decision of the board on this matter. Everybody said, no, we shouldn't do that because the main man has said it. I said, no. We have a duty. Record it. And we recorded it, and I made sure that I recorded my disagreement with it, because saying that the law does not allow it. Integrity is an issue. It's a major issue. And it's a major issue for us as Christians, as much as it is a major issue for any other people, but I think much more for us. Because it's a difficult issue, because your livelihood may depend on it. And when you're confronted with it, you think much more about your livelihood than who's making it possible for you to have livelihood. When, in my professional life, many years ago, some of you will remember, I was asked to represent a white farmer who had been accused of having shot and killed a man. And it was an African man. It was a difficult thing to do because the whole country was galvanized against this individual. And everybody thought he was shooting Africans for sport. And if you looked at the facts, the circumstances that surrounded the issues, you probably might want to believe that that's what was happening. But I was asked. It so happened that the person who asked me to deal with this was at that time Charles Jonjo, who called me. I said, could you please act in this matter? And I went to act in this matter. And I tell you, you can't believe the hostility that met me. The matter started off in Nakuru, so I had to go to Nakuru. And even just walking from the car into the court, you could see this huge gang of people who didn't even want me to walk across them. So I didn't really want to use my former assets of ensuring. I decided that I'm going to be very nice and meek and lowly and humble. Those are difficult words for me, but there it is. But here I was, I managed to go in there, but the hostility was palpable. And I remember, in fact, I can say this to you, our son was then at university in England, and he had all these things really hitting him. And I remember he said to me, he wrote to me and he said to me, Dad, if you deal with that matter, then don't even bother to pay my school fees. I will not touch the school fees because, sort of telling me it is blood money. And I could understand his pain at the time because there's so much pain. But I truly went to the Lord and asked, what would you have me do? I remember I used to talk to my chick so often about this. And I'm just so grateful that the Lord gave me that woman. Because 90% of our intelligence is resident in her. And she would actually, she spent a lot of time praying. She's a great prayer warrior. And she would pray and we talked about it. And I believe very strongly that it would hurt my integrity not to act for him than to act for him. In any case, the rest of history, I went on and acted in the matter. And I remember one of the people who was really, really against it was a much younger advocate, Mother Karua. And she was, in fact, she called a major, you may have remembered, a major demonstration in Naivasha. Afterwards, many years later, she came to me and she says, one of the things that made me later realize what a person should be is the way you acted in the Chamley case. It says, I still have great respect for you for having done that. How did you do it? And I said, just one word, Christ. Christ. The issue of integrity is such a major one. Even now we have the great issue of integrity. And the issue of integrity is not just out there, it's within the home. Within the home, seeking to be that which God expected you to be. Trusting that every step you take, He's aware of it. And not only is He aware of it, He's a light unto your path. And He's making it everything possible for you to move forward. I really, one of the verses I like very much is Psalm 32, verse 8. I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will guide you with my eye. If that is true, if that is really true, then I will walk through the valley of the shadow of death, because He says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go, and I will guide you with my eye. And that He has done in my life. Praise His name.
He was in charge of a group called Action. What did we call it, Wangia? Action Group. Who are the people who went fetching out anybody who was refusing to strike. But, and given his rugby physique, you knew you are in the wrong side if you don't. Anyway, but going against the grain is friends, normal way. When I was living in Kisumu, I actually asked him to come. We used to do as part of our evangelism, doing professional dinners where we invite non-Christians, and we knew of, and that is over 30 years ago. Fred Ojiambo's name was a national name that years ago. And I knew if I call him, the non-Christian professionals would agree to come. And Fred agreed to come. But the journalists who were all around him, they never reported about our meeting. Because Fred was the chairman of the Law Society, and the Law Society was not fighting Moi the way the population wanted. And I asked my brother, you are my brother, are you? Because of course the saying was, he must have been bribed by Moi. That's what. But of course he's my friend, so I confronted him. What is this? You seem to not be going with everybody else. And he asked me, John, you go with your conscience. You don't necessarily go with everybody's conscience. And from then onwards, I learned not to copy people who say so-and-so has been bribed. Pesa, mwago. If you can reach the person, find out. Why is he doing what he is doing? That's that years ago. And I've respected you for it. It taught me the importance of making your stand irrespective of what the rest of the people are doing. In your interest, you decide with them. But in Christ's interest, stick